So let's just begin with the title itself, The Secret History. I personally would like to believe that this is an extra bit of detail that the author intended, and I'm just not reaching for it. I was intrigued by the theme of dark academia and living for the sake of reading. I was scrolling endlessly on all social media platforms, and the algorithm suggested this book. So I did what every other person would do, that is to open Google and type the book and find out more about this book. Interestingly enough, there was another book with the same title, and what's more interesting is that it has a similar blurb for both the books. I would like to read it out so that you can see that it's similar and I'm just not reaching for it. The other book that's written is by Procopius, and on Goodreads it says, having dutifully written the official war history of Justinian reign. God, I hope I am saying that right. Procopius turned around and revealed in the secret history the other faces of the leading men and women in Byzantium, but I don't know what that is, but Byzantium in the 6th century. Justinian, the great lawgiver, appears as a hateful tyrant wedded to an ex-prostitute, Theodora, and Belarius, the brilliant general whose secretary Procopius had been, is seen as a pliable dupe of his wife Antonina, a woman as corrupt and scheming as Theodora herself. And this is what is said about Donna Tartt's book on Goodreads, is that under the influence of their charismatic classic professor, a group of clever, eccentric misfits at an elite New England college discovers a way of thinking and living that is world away from the humdrum existence of their contemporary. But when they go beyond the boundaries of normal morality, they slip gradually from obsession to corruption and betrayal, and at last into evil. I mean, it is very evident that both the books are talking about revealing this inner beast or inner evil inside these characters that is written in these novels, and I see a very big similarity because that is one of the themes of this book. And I also like your attention to be paid at the fact that there's a revelation from the narrator himself that these people are not what they seem like. They are beyond your imagination, and just asking us as the readers to not fall for what you think they are, what they appear as. And yeah, I think it's a very big theme throughout the book. What's more interesting, and personally for me, this book stands apart, is because the narration, the style, and the arrangement of how the storytelling is done. Because I, for one, have zero attention span, and I usually opt for books where I need to find out what's happening. I need to feed off of those cliffhangers and continue to read until I know what exactly happened and what went down and why it went down. But the author, she chose to have the climax revealed. I guess that's not the climax, but the main essential point is revealed in the first. And honestly, it's a very strong way to start the book, which obviously caught my attention. But you know what happened, but you're reading as so that you know why it happened, why these people chose to do such a horrendous thing to their own friend. And also another point that I like to mention is that you know the what's going to happen, and the novel is proceeding and introducing all the characters and to the events that led up to this situation, the decision that they've made. But afterwards, we've had the funeral happening for Bunny, and it's done. to my from my point of view it's done, but we've not even finished half the book, and we had so much left. And at that point I actually lost my attention towards this book, and I feel very wordy at this point, because everything is done according to me and I'm not sure why I was reading it. But at the end, obviously, it was another big high or low. I don't know what to consider that as, but yeah, it's a very significant point in the book. But throughout the whole book, it's commendable that the author never failed to grasp my attention, and I paid attention to the tiniest details, the imagery, the setting, the dialogue, which was so intricate, so well done that I couldn't take my eyes off of it, truly. It felt like I was in a world that was built to the T. Like, if I had to build a simulation, I would have asked Donna Tartt to build up this world for me because she's so beautifully done and it's so artistic and so vivid. And another thing I really enjoy in books is that I get to be inside the character's head, and it's just so not humane to do that. Like, it's not humanly possible to achieve that, never, because I personally would never know what's going through in somebody's mind. But that's something I really, really look forward to, and to understand the people's choices, the people's actions a bit more in detail. And I just loved that we got into Richard's mind and see what happens before Bunny's death, what made them do it. I think another detail that I've felt like I've noticed is that I personally believe that this pattern is set out for us, for readers to partake in, because the author does not want you to pay attention to the act itself, like the act of murdering your own friend that you hang out all the time with, but the emotions involved in it. How do these people feel about it? What made these people lead up to this act? Is it, would you consider this act okay? Would you be okay with something that your friends would have done and you got to know about it? So how would you react to it? How would you feel about it? They're giving you all these explanations which seem valid, but who are we to take somebody else's life? Who are we to commit such a sin? And when I observed that this is probably a plausible reason, I'm not saying it is the reason, but a plausible reason as to why the author would have done what they've done, I feel like I've given all the previous authors and the main characters so much strength, and I've trusted them purely blindly. Something that would definitely catch anybody's attention throughout this whole book is the setting of the book. And honestly, it felt like poetry written in a novel in the best possible way, because it just reminded me of all the poetry that I've ever read in middle school and high school, and how vivid, how much imagery that is there in poetry, and it's just so beautiful. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a sucker for poetry, and this book just swept me by my feet. The location of the events that are happening, it could be the university, it could be the houses, it could be the office, where, as Richard would call it, the work area. It's fascinating to me because I feel like the houses represent the characters pretty well, because um, of the descriptions that are given, and personalities and the houses match, which is something that you would expect. The whole vibe of university in a little town portrays the ambiance, the setting, the colors, and the imagery, everything does fit into the dark academia. I mean, it rose from this book. This book is an inspiration, but I also would like to think of this university in this little town. The vibes that this description of the location for the events and for the main character, it kind of portrays that it's obviously secluded, so it portrays that there's no escape for the main character but to accept what's in front of him and just go with the flow. Don't use your brain, don't think about things, and just go with the flow, because this option is far better than any other option, or this option is the only thing that you have, you don't have any other options. And I've come to that conclusion because in the beginning, Richard is talking about how bad of a life he has, where he is financially very in a very challenging situation, and his parents don't care about him, and how he has to like find ways to go to college, which is obviously very disheartening for a fellow college student. And then you have Richard face these rich kids and like try and fit in, where he kind of got a taste of what it's like to be these people and to experience things and not think about money and parents and all the complicated situations back home. He probably found comfort in it, and he obviously, when he was living in a, I don't want to I even want to call it a room, but four-walled room with a big hole, is what his living conditions were. And he kind of saw Henry as this angel who helped him and who made him feel better by by not just saying but in actions that he has a person who cares for him, who can help him out, and he thinks maybe he's repaying Henry by not telling them the secrets, but also wanting to fit in and experiencing these luxuries and not having to work out things financially to just spend another day. Also, another thing that is really evident in the writing is the representation of the actions that the main characters are doing, with the kind of like atmosphere outside, the kind of weather that's outside, because Richard was going through such hardships, and it is due to the weather, and it is represented in the weather and how he feels inside. He does not feel loved by his parents, and he does not want to go home. He has to struggle to make ends meet, and he feels like he does not fit in with the rest of the group, so he barely has any friends. And the other part is when they've unalived Bunny, it is also represented with snow in summer, kind of not expected, just like the main character. And so I like to personally first talk about Julian and kind of give you a little rundown of what I thought of Julian. I personally would have loved to be his pupil. It's because people, or like professors who are interested and passionate about the studies, or the subjects in the things that they do, don't usually care for their pupil or vice versa, and it's very rare to have professors who do both of them but also keep it very professional. You eventually see the red flags. He is not what I thought he would be. Like, I thought he would be the person who would navigate these people into the right path, because the descriptions but clearly not. And I did not personally see any red flags in him. I mean, he was too good to be true. That should have been my first red flag. But as I said, I give a lot of weight for the author's words and the character. My first ever moment of, oh, he might be something bad, something worse than what I thought, is when he decided to cut off his people from the rest of the uni. Because, in my perspective, the most socializing, the most learning that happens is when you're with your friends, when you're analyzing the things that you've been through, and you socialize, you connect, you market yourself as this personality, which counts a lot when you're out there in the world trying to find a place. And he's just deciding to cut them off. And more importantly, what happens if the student does not work out with the rest of the group, or there's no bond and he's just living there for the sake of it? Or worse, what if him and Julian never get along? And how would I, as a person in authority, let's just say, would think that he's doing a good job, he's being impartial, when he has all the chances to be partial, and all the things he could do to make a kid suffer? And I'm saying this not just because it's in my head and I'm just speculating things, but he lets Henry do anything he wants, and he never objects things. And Henry has this power over Julian, where he can ask Julian for an exception and he'll be accepted. It is also very, I don't know what the word is, but probably you could say it's an elitist of him, because he chooses his pupil, he chooses what kind of people would represent his legacy and continue his legacy. And that to me is obnoxious, because education is supposed to be for everybody, no matter what, which is not the case. But ideally, education is supposed to be available for everybody, and nobody can dictate who studies what and where and how. Anybody in the education field would want their class full with students who are interested in studying the subject or this language or whatever that they're up to, and hoping that this generation is still curious about the subject as much as they are, and hoping that these people will continue this knowledge and provide better versions of the subject and better. Julian is also one of those people who is out of touch, and this glamorous persona that Richard has portrayed about him started to peel off when he firstly didn't say anything, literally anything, when Henry confessed that he's committed a sin. And there was nothing, no response from Julian, and that is basically saying that I'm okay with it and I'm fine with whatever you've done, because silence is basically means you're siding with the oppressor. That's what he has done, and he let these kids do something so bad but still didn't say anything, which means he's allowing these kids to continue on, to probably unalive more people. And that is the exact opposite of education, the exact opposite of ignorance, and it is not something I hope anybody is teaching out there. In the end, I felt like that Julian resembled a cult leader in many ways, because obviously first he is seen as a charismatic person, two, he is godlike in their eyes, three, he is whatever he says is the ultimate truth for them, ultimate, he's the ultimate being. And that is obviously a description of a cult leader. And eventually the cult leader portrayal rubs off, and you see that this person is imperfect and is out of touch and he's privileged and he's all the things that you'd probably not want to have in your professor. But the ultimatum was him abandoning these kids. And I keep referring to them as kids most of the time, but I'm using that word as kids because one, they're immature. Two is because I'm referring to them in terms of Julian, like they are kids to Julian. So that's that. And yeah, so like him abandoning these people was the ultimatum to me, and it was just so shocking that he would just abandon them, say not say a single word, and have them live on their own, survive it on their own. In a way, you can see that he never participated in the whole act, but that's what the adults are for, to interject and to let you know what you're doing is either right or wrong, or to criticize and help you grow into hopefully a sane human being. Richard says this about Julie. It has always been a hard time for me to talk about Julian without romanticizing him. In many ways, I loved him the most of all, and it is with him that I am most tempted to embroider, to flatter, to basically reinvent. I don't know what else is more cult like if this is not. And he also mentions Julian's teaching style as benevolent dictatorship than democracy. And I'd like to rest my case with that. Next up, it's Henry, and he's a mastermind, if you want to call him that. He is introduced as everything I personally would have been attracted to. He is physically very much what I would like in a guy, and he's calm, he's poised, he's smart, he's calculative, he's mysterious, and overall a very nice guy, if you want to call him that. And I say that he is somebody that I would be attracted to, not just because of his personality and the physical attractive attributes about him, but it's also because he is probably the first one. I guess he was the first one to ever help Richard, and he's probably the character that Richard would choose to go to in order to seek help. And the bond with the rest of the group has been developed due to the fact that Henry has been nice, and he helped out Richard every time Richard seeked out for help, and he never shamed him. He's also one of those characters that I personally would like to read more about, because he is morally gray just like the rest of them, but he's also very smart, and he's also very calculative with how much he reveals about himself and what he wants to portray. um, it's also another thing that I would want to venture into, to realize that he does not reveal much about himself, or he does not care to talk about himself in front of all these people, but somehow he has the trust of one of the most notable professors and the rest of the group, and he easily navigates people into doing whatever he wants them to, and have uh, things done for him and obey him without thinking twice. And that's exactly what Richard is. He just took what Henry said and he just did it without hesitation. Maybe he questioned it once or twice, but I didn't think that he delved into it as much as he should have. The ultimate goal of this book is that you give value to things just based on assumptions, or you give power to things without thinking twice and just going off of the aesthetics of people and things and places. And I think Henry is the ultimate character to portray that. The next character is Bunny. Bunny is somebody I would think of as a honest person who is very brutal and mean. He is out of touch as the rest of the group is, and he is quite interesting when you compare him with the rest of the characters. He is probably the most similar to our main character, and I say that because his parents seem like they don't care about him because of the behavior they had at the funeral. And it's just an assumption that I've made. There's no statement or description where there is an outright uh, explanation as to what the parents have done to him, which is, I think I should have mentioned it, but Bunny's parents have told him to just, you know, feed off of people, and they cut him off and asked him to survive on his own. And that is quite brutal and stupid. Should I, can I call that stupid? Because as a parent, the bare minimum that a parent needs to do is make ends meet and let the kid worry about things like fending himself after he's an adult, after he's capable of doing anything on his own. But his parents just asked him to survive on his own, cut him off. And that's one thing. Second is that obviously, since his parents cut him off, he is not financially free or financially capable of doing things like the rest of the group, which is very similar to Richard. And throughout, I mean, it kind of simmers and like the pressure adds up, and you can see that Bunny is the least likable character of them all. He's outwardly classist, he does not have compassion for Francis, who is gay, so he is homophobic as well, and he hates just everything that exists on this planet at this point because I didn't see that guy ever talk good about anything. He's also not grateful or thankful or whatever you want to call that as with Henry, who provides him for basically everything he does. All the money made by Henry, as far as I can recollect, and he's still complaining and talking bad about the rest of the group when he should truly be careful that they're providing it. Yes, it might not mean much to these kids, but the bare minimum you could do is be grateful and be mindful that it's not your own, and you can't act like you own things when you truly don't. And something that I've also wondered, I just don't know how he made it to this college until this long. In a kind way, I kind of look up to him because you need to have survival skills to pursue life until now without any support from your parents. The things he's said or done are truly enraging, and it's not something I would want to listen to. I personally wouldn't like his company at all, knowing full well that we cannot make assumptions as to what he's going to do next or what kind of behavior he has coming for us. And he's unpredictable and mostly raging raging human being. But I also kind of felt sympathetic towards his character, knowing that firstly he's dead, secondly his parents didn't care about him, or at least didn't bother to show that. Third, he's unalived by his own friends, the people that he's supposed to trust the most, the people he spends the most time with. They ended up unaliving him because they were worried, not because they have anything against him. It's because he has something against them. And I think insecurity plays a role in Bunny's life, just like every other human being does. He is probably insecure that he is leeching off of other people, that he makes fun of Richard for, having less money. But I mean, he is probably also mad about the fact that Richard is making his way into the group while he is being left out. That could be a reason as well, but there's also another factor that made me come to a conclusion that it's probably insecurity more than anything, is that he was, as I mentioned, that Richard was getting closer to the group. He was also insecure, or he was worried that Henry will replace Bunny with Richard. Maybe he's worried about the finances, but I also feel like he has romantic feelings for Henry, and he was possessive about him and made him go to another country to kind of portray that he is a bigger priority than Richard is. He's most likely a character that would make fun of the things that he's most insecure about. So people will point fingers at other things that he's pointing at and just forget about Bunny's existence there and what Bunny is. Donna Tartt has done a really good job at fleshing out Richard, and I personally relate to him a lot, mainly because it was supposed to be relatable and he provides a common man's lens. And but eventually you feel that way, or eventually I came to a conclusion that I find him annoying and very naive. He, I think I should give you a brief description. He's the newest member of this friend group or the class, and he is very unreliable. He's a wannabe, he's trying to fit in, which I think every student tries to, but I think in college it's less than what it appears to be. And I didn't really understand the things he did. Like, I didn't understand why he wanted to take classics as his subject, as his for his diploma, because he is a common man. He's supposed to find jobs that will provide him money to sustain his lifestyles and make his basic necessities met. And I don't think I've read it properly, but I can't remember to why as to why he would want to choose to take up literature and classics. He was also very busy and trying to fit in, and he never questioned or tried to check what kind of personalities these are, what kind of people these people are before trying to fit in and have to survive and having to survive in this group. Even after all the questionable things that they've been saying and doing, he still chose to trust Henry, as if he knew him for that long or he knew him that well, and he just backed them up for nothing. He got involved into this whole facade even though he did nothing. He was not involved in the first place, and he just gelled with the wrong people and he had to face consequences eventually. He was too charmed by Henry to think twice, and even if he did, he came up with some excuses to understand that whatever Henry is doing, it's for the right and it's the only option, or he does not have an option. And it's the calculation of Henry was perfectly right, and it fit exactly what Richard would do, and to how to reach out to Richard to help them, but also not upright, ask for help, and it's just creepy that Henry has done his job so well that it's it's weird and it's creepy that it actually worked to the T. I find it sad or annoying that he does not he feels like this, or I would rather say there was no sense of agency in the decisions he was making, and he just let somebody else navigate all his decisions and what he's supposed to do and what how he's supposed to behave, and he just let them do it. There was another thing that, again, since I've been trying to understand the whole group dynamic, I felt like Richard was compensating to the fact that he found men attractive, I guess. He was trying to describing Camilla romantically, trying to portray him as guy, as a straight guy who is attracted to women only. These are some thoughts that are scattered all over the places, but the first thing you could obviously see is that it is classist then elitist, because the depiction of all the characters are white, privileged male. There was just one person who was a girl who was, I felt like, was just for decorative purposes. I didn't even delve into her character because there was barely anything. And these people were also fortunate enough to learn something like Greek and Latin and classics, which is not something that you would go to in order to feed yourself, in order to fend for yourself and provide for you and your family. This one part was something that I probably enjoyed the most. It is that if I had to describe this reading experience, usually on regular basis, I would probably describe my reading experience as me floating in the air or me standing next to the person and seeing what is going on, what is happening. But this book, it felt that way, but also at the same time I felt like I was going down this void. I just accidentally fell into this void, and I don't have any sense of space, any sense of time, any sense of anything that I could hold on to and look around this world and experience life with the main characters. I was just, the whole time, I was just crashing down deep into the void, not knowing when I will hit the ground. But I was also terrified to hit the ground. But I'm a really big fan of irony, especially when it is very detail oriented. So it is fascinating that this book is such a big irony in itself. It talks about us giving into things and glamorizing it without being critical, without personally analyzing it, and see how it fits into our life. Meanwhile, we're here 30 years later romanticizing the things. And other thing that these people are privileged to have is the time and the resources to do such supernatural-esque things. To First of all, like I don't think people would come across these supernatural acts in the first place if you don't belong to a cult, at least. um, these people have the resources to make that happen and have the time to perform it, and that's not something a unique kid would have. He would be struggling to make ends meet while also having to submit 3,000 assignments a day. And yeah, that is also something that these people had, another added factor to it, if you will. I'd love to go through each and every one of her lines and quote her every chance that I get, but this is what we're living up to. This is these are the least amount of quotes I could include to convince you to read the book rather than just get a summary of it from somebody else. If by romantic you mean solitary and introspective, I said, I think romantics are frequently the best classes. He laughed. The romantics are often failed classes. I envied them and found them attractive. Moreover, the strange quality, far from being natural, gave every indication of having been intensely cultivated. It was the same, I would come to find, with Julian, though he gave quite the opposite impression of freshness and candor. It was spontaneity, but superior art, which made it seem unsteady. Studied or not, I wanted to be like them. It was heady to think that these qualities were acquired ones, and that, perhaps, this was the way I might learn them. Exactly. And how did they drive people mad? They turned up the volume of the inner monologue, magnified qualities already present to great excess, made people so much themselves that they couldn't stand it. And how can we lose this maddening self? Lose it entirely? Love. One loses oneself for the sake of the other, but in doing so, so becomes enslaved and miserable to the most capricious of all gods. What? One can lose oneself in the joy of battle, in fighting for the glorious cause, but there are not a great many glorious causes for which to fight these days. Beauty is terror. Whatever we call beautiful, we quiver before it. And what could be more terrifying and beautiful to the souls like the Greeks or our own than to lose control completely? If we are strong enough in our souls, we can rip away the veil and look that naked, terrible beauty right in the face. Let God consume us, devour us, unstring our bones, then spit us out reborn. I do appear as something of a stranger in these early memories, watchful and grudging, oddly silent. All my life, people have taken my shyness for sullenness, snobbery, bad temper of one sort or another. The rich man tries to pretend that the poor man is his equal in every respect but money, which is simply not true. It was because I thought too much, lived too much in my mind. It was hard to make decisions. I felt immobilized. What are the dead, anyway, but waves and energy, light shining from a dead star? With that being said, I also would like to mention that I find comfort in the ending of this book. It kind of portrays that no matter who you are or what personality you have or what kind of persona you project onto the society, your actions have consequences and you have to face it no matter what. There's a possibility that you can assume that I'm saying that they deserve what they got in the end, but I personally feel like I'm nobody to judge and quantify who deserves what. I'm glad that they get an ending like that. It is tragic, and this book was supposed to be tragedy, and I find comfort in that, knowing that evil has a tragic ending. And something that I would like to mention as well is that I know full well that I did not cover all the points I would want to, because it's a big book and it's a whole universe in itself. And I probably missed a lot of points, But this is where my mental capacity is at, and this is where I'm going to conclude my unhinged rant about my favorite book that I read recently.